Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Chris and I'm a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is Melbourne Cup Day 1995. This recorded workshop is about the middle steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program, steps 5 to 9. It's based on AA literature, particularly the AA Big Book. This illustrated guide has been put together by two alcoholics as part of a series of workshops we present to AA groups, conventions and in treatment settings.
Hi, my name's David. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I've been sober since May 1993.
But David, I'll hand it over to you.
As Chris said, today we're looking at the middle steps, the rest of the housecleaning steps. These are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. What was said to me when I was first around, we take these steps one by one in order with some guidance. That meant a sponsor. Almost everything we're looking at tonight will be readings out of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, which was written when the first 100 members got sober. There's a couple of places though we might throw in a couple of readings out of another book which was written probably about 13 years after the big book, called The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, but I'll point out when that is when we're reading those ones. But just quickly, how do we get to these middle steps? We start with step 1, where we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And I drank for 17 years, and the last 3 of those years I was desperately trying to stop drinking, and I failed and failed. I really identified with this powerlessness, particularly when people talked about the 2 aspects of alcoholism as described in the book. The first being the physical craving. As an alcoholic, I don't drink like most other people. Most people can have a few drinks and enjoy it and get the effect thereafter, and then they can get to a point where they say, no thanks, I've had enough. Whereas whenever I started drinking, I got this other effect that most people don't get. I get this craving to keep going and keep going, this physical thing. So that's the basis of the disease. It's a physical difference between what happens when I drink and what happens when normal drinkers drink. And over time that gets worse, and it causes all sorts of problems in my life, because I start becoming dependent on it, and I start lying about it, and I'm breaking promises, I'm making bad decisions because I'm drunk a lot of the time, I'm letting people down. It's affecting me in all sorts of ways. My relationships, my health, my work, how much money I've got in my pocket, all of those things. And eventually I got to a point where I make a sane decision. Well, if I can't control my drinking, the best thing to do is stop. And then I found I had this other part of the illness, which AA describes as a mental obsession. So even though I would stop drinking, and in the end the only way I could do that was to get some medical help to do it, but I would stop drinking, but that mental obsession, that thought, that memory, the urge to do it again kept on coming back and coming back and coming back. And eventually I'd do the insane thing and I'd pick it up again. And I picked it up again, sets off the craving again, goes out of control, life falls apart. And then I would stop again, and the mental obsession was still there, and there was that insanity. So the real problem is not the obsession, it's the actual insanity of actually acting on that thought and picking it up. And that becomes this cycle. And I was stuck, and I was powerless over alcohol. So when I came to AA, I readily admitted that I was powerless. I had this problem I couldn't fix on my own. Of course, there's no hope in that first step. The first step doesn't give me any hope. It's just the realization I've got a problem that I can't fix on my own. So step 2, if I'm powerless over alcohol, step 2 suggests that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So this is where the hope is, in step 2. Because the promise is I can be restored to sanity. So step 2 is simply believing it's possible for me to recover. I came into AA hopeless. I'd almost given up trying to give up because I just failed over and over again. But I met people in AA who'd recovered, and that gave me some hope. Maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's a way out of this. So where's the evidence that this works, that I can be restored to sanity, that I can stop drinking and stay stopped? In meetings, we meet people who've recovered, we get hope and inspiration. And good thing about it, when they talked about this higher power, I was a bit put off by that, but the nice thing is I was told we each get to choose our own concept of that higher power. AA doesn't try and tell me what to believe, but it does suggest I need to believe in something. That's up to each individual person. So I've got that hope. And then I come to step 3, where I need to make a decision. So step 3 made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And so to me, that's a decision to go on with the rest of the process. A decision to live a sober spiritual life, to take the same path that those members that I admire, the ones that are sober and happy about it, the same path that they've taken, as in going through this series of spiritual exercises, which are the 12 steps. And so this is what it says immediately after we take step 3.
Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions.
I like the way it talks about next, we've launched out into a course of vigorous action. So that third step is not something I just do passively and then go and third step prayer every day for a month. Daily prayer doesn't come into the program until we get to step 11. The step 3 decision is a decision to immediately take vigorous action. And what action is it suggesting? Personal house cleaning. Because the third step decision has an effect, but has little permanent effect unless it once followed by action, and that's what I'm after, a permanent effect. So what's it suggesting I do? These next few steps known as the house cleaning steps. So we're going to use the same analogy in this workshop as it does in the book. It talks about cleaning a house. So here's a house. This particular house doesn't look too bad on the outside, but some of us come into AA and we're beat up on the inside and then the outside. This is the analogy about the way that we've been thinking and the way that we've been living. And as you can see, this house is a bit of a mess. The way that we're thinking, the way that we've been treating other people. So we need to clean this up. If I want to live a sober spiritual life, I need to get rid of the things that are standing in the way of my path to seeking a power greater than myself. So in the book, this is what it says.
Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4.
So we start with step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We had a look at this in detail last week, but the next few pages give us instructions on how to do this. Quite clear instructions on how to take this inventory. And what we end up with is we end up with a list of resentments and what caused them in the first place, and then most importantly, a list of the mistakes that I made in relation to those resentments. And I've got a list of my fears and what I did to set the ball rolling with those fears. I've listed my sex conduct and looked at the way that I've been treating other people and reacting to the way that they treat me. And I've also got a list of the people that I've harmed. So after taking step 4, if you want to see that workshop, you can actually find it on the website illustratedsteps.org. But this is what we end up with, these lists. And we've learned a lot about ourselves. So we've been able to label a whole lot of things in our thinking and the way that we've been acting that we need to get rid of. Down here I've got the couch of resentment. Love sitting on the couch of resentment, blaming the rest of the world. I wouldn't be in this position if he hadn't have sacked me or she hadn't have left me. Up here I've got the bath of fear. Fear is this really crippling thing that stops me making good decisions, stops me living life to the full. Over here I've got the bed of lies, all the dishonesty and deceit and the way that I've treated other people. And down here the kitchen sink of remorse. So you can see how it's difficult to live a sober spiritual life if I've got these negative things going on in my head. I've got things like anger and intolerance, aggression, maybe cruelty, guilt, anxiety and worry, procrastination, jealousy, conceit, manipulation. I hope no one's got all of these defects of character. Hypocrisy, sensitivity, self-pity. And underneath it, we find, it tells us as we go through this, particularly in the resentment part, we're looking for what's beneath all of these defects of character. And it talks about us being selfish, dishonest, self-seeking and frightened. It's not a great place to be at the end of step 4. Nothing's really changed. We have learned something. We've labelled a whole lot of things that need to change. It's pretty hard to live this sober spiritual life if my head is full of all this negative stuff. So that's what we're going to address with the rest of the house cleaning steps. We now know what needs to change. So that's step 4. And then what do we do after step 4?
Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We've admitted certain defects. We've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We've put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter.
I really like this. It gives us a bit more insight about what's the purpose of the 12 steps. What's the purpose of these house cleaning steps? We've now discovered the obstacles in our path. See, in the 3rd step, we made a decision to take a different path in life, a path that most people don't take, a deliberate conscious decision to seek a power greater than ourselves, a deliberate conscious decision to live a spiritual life. So these middle steps are about getting rid of the obstacles to living that spiritual life. And so the first thing I need to do that, I've got my list, I've got all the information I need, but now I need to find someone that I trust and share it with. So step 5, admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. It's a simple process. I just need to find someone and then read the stuff out, basically. So the big question is, who do we choose to hear our 5th step? Now notice that we don't make this decision about who this person will be until after we've completed our 4th step. I remember as I was writing my 4th step inventory, I had in the back of my mind a particular person that I was going to share it with. It was actually a counsellor at the rehab I was at. And as I was writing it, I kept on thinking about what she would think when I read this bit. And I found myself almost colouring what I was writing based on what I thought she might think. And I thought, this is no good. This allows a bit of dishonesty and stuff, because I'm not being entirely honest, because I'm sort of anticipating the 5th step. So when I put that out of mind, as I'm doing my 4th step, it's between me and a piece of paper and my higher power and nobody else. And that allowed me to be more honest. But once I get to this point, now I have to choose someone. And the big book says the person should be trustworthy. It's got to be someone that I trust is not going to tell my secrets to the rest of the world. And it needs to be someone with understanding, particularly understanding the spiritual nature of this whole process. The suggestions from the AA Big Book are a clergyman or a doctor or psychologist, or perhaps a friend or family member, but it gives us a warning about that. It says, the rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. So we don't choose someone where, if by our sharing, we may harm them or someone else. Sharing with a friend or a family member if we're actually going to be talking about another person that person knows. Now, when the Big Book was written, the whole idea of sponsorship hadn't really formed. They didn't use that word. But over the next few years, this idea of having a particular sponsor that helped you and guided you through the steps became a thing in AA. And a few years later, the second book, this 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, this is a series of essays about the steps. And it reflects some of the experience since they wrote the first book. This is what it says about choosing the person to hear the 5th step.
Our next problem will be to discover the person to whom we are to confide. Here we ought to take much care, remembering that prudence is a virtue which carries a high rating. Perhaps we shall need to share with this person facts about ourselves, which no others ought to know. We shall want to speak with someone who is experienced, who not only has stayed dry, but has been able to surmount other serious difficulties. Difficulties perhaps like our own. This person may turn out to be one's sponsor, but not necessarily so. If you have developed a high confidence in him and his temperament and problems are close to your own, then such a choice will be good. Besides, your sponsor already has the advantage of knowing something about your case. Perhaps, though, your relation to him is such that you would care to reveal only part of your story. If this is the situation, by all means do so, for you ought to make a beginning as soon as you can. It may turn out, however, that you'll choose someone else for the more difficult and deeper revelations. This individual may be entirely outside of AA. For example, your clergyman or your doctor. For some of us, a complete stranger may prove the best bet.
So there's another alternative, the sponsor. So I just want to tell a quick story about a guy. He's passed away now. He was over 40 years sober in AA when he passed, and he'd helped a lot of people. He was known as Ukulele Jimmy. It used to be back in the day, lots of us had nicknames and things. So Ukulele Jimmy told the story about when he was early around AA and he came to his 5th step. He didn't trust anybody in the world, particularly other alcoholics, because he thought other alcoholics will be just as dishonest and untrustworthy as I am. So I'm not going to share my 5th step with another alcoholic. And he couldn't find anyone he trusted until Ukulele Jimmy eventually found a monk who had taken a vow of silence. And this is the only person that Jimmy was actually able to trust. The monk wasn't completely silent, but he lived in a monastery up in the hills and had taken this vow, living a life of prayer and meditation, and that he would never leave the monastery. And so for Jimmy, that was good enough. So Jimmy shared his fifth step with that monk who had taken a vow of silence. The funny thing about it is that over the years after that, all those secrets that Jimmy was never going to tell anyone else actually became useful when he was sponsoring the next person and helping other alcoholics. So they did actually come out. But initially, the only person he could find was that monk. So even Jimmy could find someone. In my case, the AA group that I went to start with, I was a couple of months sober, and a lot of the members, this was in Bendigo here in Victoria, a lot of the members went to a particular priest, a Catholic priest in Bendigo. Even those members that weren't Catholic, because this particular priest had had a lot of experience. He was a very worldly sort of priest before he became a priest. Wasn't an alcoholic, but he'd had a colourful life. And somehow this particular priest understood alcoholics. And so a number of the members had actually done their fifth step with him, and it was often suggested. I didn't do it with him, maybe because I had some prejudices at the time, but I actually chose an AA member. A member that I trusted wouldn't take any nonsense from me, that sort of thing. And I chose that person and asked him whether he would hear my fifth step. Now, I'd sat at the kitchen table for a couple of days and written the fourth step, and I went to the Friday night meeting. And after the meeting, I asked this guy, will you hear my fifth step? And he said he'd be honoured. And then he thought about it and he said, I think I've got some time next Tuesday. So I thought he was going to do it the next day. So I can remember the next 3 days of this anticipation and I really want to do this fifth step. On the other hand, a whole lot of fear about what's going to happen and what it will be like if I read out some of these secrets. But he eventually came to the rehab that I was at and we sat down, we said the third step prayer together, and that's how I did it. So this is what the book says about what we do.
When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We've a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realise that we engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approach in this way will be glad to help. They will be honoured by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go to it, eliminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe.
It's interesting, up until this point, with step 2 is where I start to get this hope. I was hopeless. I'd been trying to stop drinking for so long, but now I had this hope in step 2. But that's really just all it was. It was this hope that it might work for me because I'd seen it work for so many other people. But it was after I'd taken the fifth step that hope turned to a real belief. It changed to this belief. This stuff is working. This stuff is bringing about a change in me and will continue to bring about that change as long as I continue on with the rest of the program.
I did my fifth step with my sponsor and I had no idea I was going to do it with her while I was doing the fourth step. I had all these other ideas of who I was going to do it with, but in the end I did do it with my sponsor. And I went to her house. I sat out the front of her house for at least half an hour just thinking about all these things I need to say out loud. And I went in there and she said, look, right from the beginning we said the third step prayer, and she actually said to me, I'm not a guidance counsellor, I'm not a marriage guidance counsellor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm just another alcoholic who's going to be sitting here and listening to what you've got to say. It was really nice to know that I wasn't going to be judged and I wasn't going to be told what to do with my life. And we did it over a number of days, actually, over 3 days. And the real power of it was saying it out loud. The fourth step gets it from up here onto a piece of paper or onto a computer screen or wherever. It's more tangible. And the fifth step allowed me to say it out loud, so it was in the universe. And as David's sponsor, she told me some of her experiences. And afterwards I thought, oh, I'm free of that now. Where's the lightning bolt? Where's the calm? Where's the joy? And I went home, and my 15-year-old daughter had just got a new job. She'd left school and she'd just got a new job, and she was there waiting for me. And I walked in and I said, oh, I've done my fifth step. And she said, oh, good on you, Mum, you know, Melissa and Wendy were very, very supportive. And she said, what are you going to do now? And I said, we got an empty baked bean tin and we stuck it in the sink, and I got my fourth step. I kept my harms done list because I knew I was going to need that in the eighth and ninth step because I had guidance through that. And so I burnt my fourth step because I never want to do that ever again. You know, it was just like, it's done. It's out of the way. I'm on this journey of change, you know. And it was one of them. We went out and had a meal at the pub because I could. I wasn't fearful of that anymore. And it's a great memory because it was only 8 months later and Melissa and Wendy were dead. They were killed in a car crash. And so this is the power of what these steps can do, is to keep us moving forward. It's a great memory for me to keep really close to my heart.
One thing about step 6 and 7, I'm a bit of a pedantic for words, and you notice in step 6 it talks about having God remove these defects of character, whereas step 7 talks about removing our shortcomings. And I want to know, what's the difference between a defect of character and a shortcoming? Well, when Bill was asked about that, you know, he was the one that first wrote these things down. Why are there two different terms? Do they mean the same thing? He said, yes, they mean exactly the same thing. Defects of character and shortcomings are the same thing. I just want to use different words because it reads better on the banner. But I think there is a subtle difference between the two. I'm going to look at it like this. So here's a list of defects of character, and there's something that I have, whereas a shortcoming to me is something that I'm short of, that I'm lacking something. So for example, dishonesty is a lack of honesty. I'm short of honesty. Resentment is a lack of compassion. Fear, a lack of courage. Selfishness, a lack of generosity. Intolerance, a lack of respect. Worry, a lack of hope. Self-pity, a lack of gratitude. Pride, a lack of humility. Hatred, a lack of love. And what happens to us as we start practicing these two steps in particular and continue on with the steps? Those defects of character are removed, and what are they replaced with? Well, these things: honesty, compassion, courage, generosity, respect, hope, gratitude, humility, and love. And so now these become the qualities, the spiritual qualities towards which I now aspire, and my life has started to change. So that's steps 6 and 7, being ready to change and praying for help. If we look at our house, that's what the house looked like before we started, all that negative thinking. But we've gone through those first 7 steps and we've asked God to remove those defects of character. Off they go. And what a change, you know. We've cleaned up the whole of this house. So instead of the couch of resentment, I've now got the armchair of compassion, the shower screen of courage, the clean sheets of honesty, and the dishwasher of gratitude.
That was mine.
And now I'm seeking these other spiritual qualities, okay, in my life: tolerance and gentleness, some wisdom, kindness, love, you know, self-respect and trust and hope, sincerity, self-control, responsibility, integrity. That's a big one for me. That idea that I'm someone that's trusted, that I actually do the things that I promised to do. You know. Perhaps some serenity in my life, generosity, patience, humility. And as you can see, it's a lot easier to live a sober spiritual life in this house than it was the way it was before. I remember getting to this point in the program and leaving the rehab and getting back into the world, and life was so much better. I was going to meetings just about every day. I'm putting my hand out to the newcomer, got a new job, things are getting better in my life. But then I remember the sister-in-law, some damage done there. There's some harm's done there. I want to avoid her as much as possible. The local shops, I still owe the milk bar some money there. I'll avoid that place as much as possible, go and shop somewhere else. This Uncle Fred, I borrowed money from him. I'll avoid him if I can. There's the outstanding legal problems I've got. I want to put those off as long as I can. The place I used to work, I left there with bad blood, so avoid those people. Mrs. Jones, my next door neighbour, there was that resentment and I was inconsiderate to her, so I want to sort of hide from her. I don't want to see her because it brings back all that nasty stuff from the past. So here I am sober, life's getting better, but it felt to me like all these things from the past were still coming up and whacking me on the back of the head and saying, yeah, you're sober now, but what about these things you did in the past? So there's more work I need to do. This is what the book says.
Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9.
So step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
We have a list of all persons we've harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol.
So we have a list. We made our list of people when we did our 4th step, but now it's about becoming willing to make those amends. There's my list, and it suggests we pray for the willingness to make amends to every single person on that list. So that's my step 8. All the way through, there's this sort of preparation and then action. The 4th step is this preparation, and then I go and share that with someone else. The 6th step is preparation, becoming willing, and the action is in step 7. Step 8 is this becoming willing. I pray for the willingness, and the action, the practical side of it, is in step 9. So step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So I'm willing to make amends to everyone on the list, but it's got to be practical. There are some cases where it's actually not possible for me to make amends, and also there might be some cases where trying to make amends would make matters worse. I'm willing to do it, but this is where it's really good to get lots of advice about how to do this and listen to other people about how they've approached some of these amends. So here's my list, and I can look through those. Some of them are pretty obvious. Mrs. Jones, my next door neighbour, well, I can apologise and maybe offer to mow her lawn. She's committed her husband for drinking. He's in the asylum. So while I'm mowing my lawn, perhaps I can offer to mow her front lawn as well. My employer, pay the money back, strive to be more reliable. My wife, well, that requires a frank discussion, admitting my faults. There's a lot of information about step 9 in the big book. It was said to me, read through that again and again. It gives us good advice about when we're doing amends to our loved ones, to be careful not to criticise the other person. The sister-in-law, apologise, pay the money back. That first girlfriend, now, I've got a question mark on that one. I don't know where she is. So I'll put that aside for the moment. Barry and Barry's girlfriend, not sure about the difficulty with that thing. The girl from 1994, I don't even remember her name. The mistress, if I go and see the mistress and the wife finds out that I've been back to see the mistress, it could make a lot of problems worse. The hotel in Sydney, though, I left without paying a bill. So when I'm able to, I can send them the money. My brother requires a frank apology. That ex-work colleague. Now, not only have I got that person fired, but I've actually hurt his reputation. When it comes to making amends there, probably really have to think about that one. The shop I worked at, when I was 16, I stole from the till. The shop's no longer there. The grandmother's just passed away, but Uncle Fred, I can arrange to pay that money back. It says in the book, we make the best deal we can when we're doing that. So you can see some of them are quite obvious, what I need to do. And some of them, I probably need to get some advice and read the book and really determine what to do about them. This is part of what it says about it.
There may be some wrongs you can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate and humble, without being servile or scraping.
So there may be some that we can never fully right. The instruction there is that we don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would if we could. I like the idea that we should be sensible, tactful, considerate and humble. I'm none of those things. That's why I need those first steps before that. That's why step 9 is where it is. I need to bring about that change before going ahead and doing this, because I was a very sorry drunk. I was always apologising for what I'd done and then going and doing it again the next day. It's a really amazing experience to go through this 9th step and actually go out and make amends. One thing it seems to me though is whatever I thought was going to happen when I approached the person, whatever I had in my mind was going to happen, rarely ever did. For an example, my younger brother, the end of my drinking, I ended up homeless and I'd come out of a detox, I had nowhere to live, and my parents convinced my younger brother to let me stay at his place on the condition that I wouldn't drink. I readily agreed to that because I really didn't want to drink, but I was there for a time and got a new job, life was going really well, getting back on top of things, everything was going great, and then I relapsed. And I tried to keep that secret from him, and I was drinking secretly and it just got worse and worse, and then I stopped going to work, and he found me one morning, I was really drunk, and basically packed up all my gear, took my keys and my ID and bundled me in the car, went to the place that I worked and quit my job on my behalf. I hadn't been at work for probably 2 weeks, I'd been drinking 24 hours a day, and took me up to Echuca to my parents' place, and they didn't know what to do with me, but they put me in hospital. That was the last hospitalisation I had. It was from there that I went to a rehab and was introduced to AA. When it came to making amends, my brother was about to go overseas and live in London for 2 years, and I thought, oh, this is okay. It says in the book that if you can't do it straight away, it's okay to put it off. I thought I could put it off, but it happened the day before he left to go to London. We're in the same place, and I knew this is the opportunity, I have to do it right now. And we sat down and I started apologising for all that had happened. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, I don't want your apology. You're always apologising. I don't want your apology. And my heart sunk. And then he said, all I want you to do is say thank you. And it suddenly occurred to me that I'd never said thank you for all he'd done for me, for all he put up with and put himself out on the water. So I was able to thank him. That wasn't what I was expecting, and it shocked me. But it still gives me goosebumps when I remember that moment when he says, I don't want your apologies, I just want you to thank me. My ex-wife, means to her, I thought when I tell her about mistakes I'd made, she'll admit that she'd made mistakes as well. She didn't. All she said to me was, pay the money. Pay the child support into my bank account on the correct date, the full amount every single month. That's all. Didn't want to hear anything else, just said pay the money. And so that's what I had to do, make sure the full amount was in the bank on the right day. And it was only after doing that for month upon month that things were actually able to change. But this is an amazing step. I love going to AA meetings where people share their experiences about step 9. Some amazing stories I've heard.
When I made amends to my 2 oldest daughters who spent most of the traumatic times with me, and they were very happy that I was sober, and they'd actually met a lot of AA members and they had almost memorised the 12 steps and made sure I was on track. You know, whatever those meetings do, Mum, you better go because you come back a different person. They were very supportive. And I was talking to people and things like that. So I didn't know what to expect when I made amends to them. And I really said that I'm sorry for what's happened in the past and I really want to do better in the future. And to myself, I said I want to do those living amends, to be there as a proper mum and act on that. They said, oh, fine, Mum, we understand. They were 16 and 17. And they were full on, and the next day they went out and got drunk and came home and just abused the shit out of me. And they just said, look, it's your fault we're here, it's your fault we haven't got the things that we wanted, and you've embarrassed us and you're a hypocrite. And I couldn't say anything, I just had to take it because what they were saying was true. You know? And I think it was something that they needed to get out as well, so they needed to voice their feelings. And then the next day we just got on with life. Things started to change for the better after that, and things changed really quickly, and I started to become the person that I really wanted to be, the mother and the confidant that I wanted to be for them. And I started doing those living amends. and then 7 months later they were killed in a car crash. And so I was so grateful that I got the opportunity to do this, to be honest to them, and because it brought us closer together, even for a short time. And so you just never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I was so grateful that I had that opportunity. I made amends to my ex-husband over the phone because I'm not an idiot. It was a very violent relationship in the end, and wasn't a happy time for any of us. He was okay for about 5 minutes. We were both okay for about 5 minutes. There'd been too much hurt done, so we never really reconciled. The best amends I was able to give to him was to not talk to him for the last 5 years of his life. He dropped dead at 50, and there was calm for 5 years between us because we didn't interact. And that was my amends to him. It can come in all sorts of ways, but I had to do it first to get to this point where I had to start making those changes in my life, and hopefully that other people could come along with me as well.
So here was our list that we looked at. That first girlfriend, I don't know where she is. Well, I'm willing to make amends if we meet again. I can hold myself ready. Barry's girlfriend, that caused a whole lot of jealousy. After consulting with a sponsor or someone else to make sure that I'm not squibbing it, just realised that I need to stay away from them because contacting them would only make matters worse. Okay. The girl from 1994, don't remember her name, so I can't even find her on Facebook. So I can resolve not to treat others the way that I treated her. The mistress, I can't go and see her, but I can write an honest letter and explain the situation there. That ex-work colleague, got him sacked from his job. This actually may require more than just a one-on-one apology. It might mean a more public apology and doing all I can to restore his reputation. There's a great story in the AA book about a guy, a businessman, who took money from a rival and didn't give him a receipt and then claimed he never received the money. And it caused this big feud for years and years. And in the end, when the guy has to make amends, he knows he has to try and restore the reputation of his business rival. And so he went to the local church. He hadn't been going to church, but went to the local church, and after the service stood up and said, "You know this feud I've been having? All this time it was my fault, not the other person's fault." And so was able to do that. So as I said, read the book, get advice, listen to other people's experiences. The shop I worked at is no longer there. Well, I can work out how much money I stole from them and contribute that, say, to a charity, for example. My grandmother's passed away. Again, I can write a letter. I've heard lots of great stories about people going to a gravesite, writing a letter. So there's things we can do. And this is an amazing thing, this part of the program, because now I really am on this new way of life, this spiritual path. About this time, we have in the big book what's known as the 9th step promises. You may have heard these read out at AA meetings.
If we're as painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace, no matter how far down the scale we have gone. We will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realise that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialise if we work for them. And
that's our experience too. The thing I notice about this, when I really look at it, and we were talking before about steps 6 and 7 and having defects of character removed and what are they replaced with. You can see as I look through this, there's a list of things that we lose. We will not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. The feeling of uselessness and self-pity disappears. So we're losing the negative. We lose interest in selfish things. Self-seeking slips away. Fear of people and economic insecurity leave us. So that's those negative things going away. And what are they replaced with? A new freedom and a new happiness. We start to comprehend the word serenity, and we start to know peace. We can see how our experience can benefit other people, and we gain this interest in our fellows. Our whole attitude, outlook upon life changes, and we start to intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. It's an amazing thing. Here we are now on this new way of life, and these changes have come about. And by this point, around step 10 is when that's the fulfillment of the promise from step 2, is that by this point, sanity has been restored. And the last 3 steps become our daily program. Next week, when we come back, we'll be talking specifically about steps 10 and 11, that daily routine. But continuing inventory on a daily basis, step 10, prayer and meditation in step 11, practicing all these spiritual principles. And of course, the most powerful thing, the most important thing I need to do in order to stay sober long term is to become unselfish and help the next person. Pass this information that was given so freely to me by those members at those meetings that I was going to early days. Pass this information on to the next person. That's why we do this. This is what keeps us sober. So thanks for letting us share.
Thank you for listening. You can contact us through our website, illustratedsteps.org.